Most teenagers worried about homecoming dresses or who would sit with them at lunch. But not Rachel Torres. At 17, she had only two sets of clothes she cared about: her school uniform and her camouflage fatigues. The camo wasn't regulation issue. Not yet, anyway. It was a pair of secondhand BDU pants and a jacket she'd bought at a surplus store with babysitting money. She wore them everywhere, and to her classmates, it made her target. "Who do you think you are, G.I. Jane?" A boy jeered once when she walked down the crowded hall. The laughter rippled, sharp as broken glass. Rachel didn't answer. She never did. She simply walked past, jaw clenched, eyes fixed on the lockers ahead. She knew what they saw: a skinny girl from a working-class family, pretending to be tough in army clothes. They didn't know about the nights she stayed up, flashlight under her blanket, reading field manuals instead of fashion magazines. They didn't know that her father, once a proud infantry sergeant, had left their lives in shambles after coming home broken from his last deployment. Rachel carried his dog tags under her shirt every day. That, more than the camo, was her armor. But still, the ridicule wore on her, especially when even teachers looked at her funny. One afternoon, after gym class, she overheard two cheerleaders whispering in the locker room. "Can you believe she wore camo again? She looks like she's playing soldier." Yeah, it's pathetic. Like anyone would take her seriously. Rachel sat on the bench, tying her boots, hands trembling. She could ignore the boys, but hearing the girls mock her cut deeper. Because once upon a time, she'd wanted to fit in with them. Once upon a time, she'd thought she could be both, a soldier's daughter and just another teenager. But no, that wasn't her path. Her mom didn't get it either. "Why can't you just wear normal clothes, Ratch? You're making life harder on yourself." Rachel didn't have the words to explain that it wasn't about clothes. It was about who she was becoming. Every Saturday, she biked to the National Guard base outside of town. She wasn't enlisted, of course, but she volunteered, washing vehicles, folding tents, fetching coffee for the sergeants. They let her hang around because she never complained, and because she worked like someone twice her age. One of the older guardsmen, a woman named Staff Sergeant Lopez, saw something in her. "You got grit, kid," Lopez told her once, as Rachel struggled to carry a box of MREs across the hangar. "Don't let those school punks shake that out of you." Rachel had nodded, hiding how much that single compliment meant. It was the first time an adult had validated what she felt deep down, that she wasn't just playing dress-up. But back at school, it was harder. Teachers told her to take off the jacket. Students called her Private Torres, or worse. She kept her head down and thought of her father, the man who had once taught her how to lace boots and strip a rifle. What she didn't know was that her life was about to change in the most public way imaginable. It started on an ordinary Tuesday. The seniors were outside on the football field for PE. The sun blazed down, sweat-soaking t-shirts. Rachel, in her camo jacket, ran laps alone on the far side. The others jogged together, tossing jokes about her under their breath. "Hey, Torres," one called out. "Don't get lost in the jungle." The laughter that followed was cut short by a sound none of them expected: the deep, chopping thunder of rotor blades. At first, students shaded their eyes and squinted confused. Then they saw it. A UH-60 Black Hawk helicopter sweeping low over the horizon, sun glinting off its spinning rotors. It came closer and closer. By the time it hovered over the football field, dust blasting across the track, kids were screaming and running for cover. Teachers shouted, hair whipping in the storm of rotor wash. The Black Hawk's wheels touched down on the 50-yard line like it had landed in a war zone. And then, to everyone's shock, the side door slid open. Rachel froze, heart pounding. She recognized the insignia. She recognized the uniforms. This wasn't a stunt. This wasn't a drill. The Special Operations patch. Why were they here? And more importantly, why was one of them pointing straight at her? At first, Rachel thought it was a mistake. There was no way, no possible way, that a team of elite soldiers had landed on her school field for her. She looked behind her. expecting someone else to step forward. But the operator in the doorway, visor down, kept his gloved finger pointed squarely at her. The whispers started immediately. "Wait, Torres. No way. Why would they want her? Is this some kind of prank?" Rachel's legs felt rooted to the turf. Dust swirled around her boots. The Blackhawk's engine roared like a beast demanding her answer. "Torres," a teacher shouted over the din, "get back here." But another voice carried even louder. A female voice, sharp and commanding, from inside the chopper. Rachel Torres, front and center. Her chest tightened. She knew that voice. It was Staff Sergeant Lopez. Rachel's feet finally moved. She walked forward, each step shaking, while the rest of the students backed away, wide-eyed. Some pulled out phones, filming the scene. The girl they had laughed at, the outcast in camo, being summoned by a real military helicopter in front of the whole school. She reached the open door. Lopez leaned out, goggles up, face streaked with dust. "Torres, we got a situation. You've trained enough to know what's happening. You're coming with us." Rachel's throat went dry. "But I'm just—" "You're ready." Lopez cut her off. "Now get in." The moment stretched. The football field, the laughter, the sneers of years, all of it hung there, about to tip one way or another. And then Rachel grabbed the offered hand and climbed into the Black Hawk. Gasps rose from the crowd. Phones caught the image. The girl in camo disappearing into the belly of a combat helicopter as the door slammed shut. The pilot gave a thumbs up. The rotors surged. Within seconds, the Black Hawk lifted off, blowing away the loose papers and dust of the stunned high schoolers left behind. Inside, Rachel strapped into a jump seat, her pulse racing. Lopez leaned close, shouting over the noise. "This isn't a drill. Enemy militia crossed the border last night. We need every hand we can trust. You wanted to prove yourself? This is it." Rachel's mind reeled. She had dreamed of this moment, but not like this. Not with so many eyes watching. Not with the weight of real combat pressing down. She thought of the jeers, the insults, the loneliness. She thought of her father's dog tags under her shirt. And for the first time, she allowed herself a small, steady smile. The girl they mocked was gone. The soldier was taking her place. The Black Hawk banked toward the horizon, carrying her away from the football field forever. Rachel clutched the harness straps as the Black Hawk sliced through the sky. The roar of the rotors pressed against her chest, but it was the pounding of her own heartbeat that echoed loudest in her ears. Across from her sat a squad of soldiers, faces hidden behind night vision goggles and dust masks. Their rifles rested between their knees, hands steady despite the vibration of the flight. They weren't boys at her high school, throwing jokes around like footballs. These were warriors, and they were looking at her. One of them finally spoke, voice muffled by the headset. "She's just a kid." Staff Sergeant Lopez cut him a sharp glare. "She's earned her seat." Eyes forward. Rachel's stomach twisted. Earned? She hadn't earned anything yet. She was 17, untested, a volunteer who hung around the guard base folding tents. What if they made a mistake? But then Lopez leaned close, her voice low so only Rachel could hear. "Listen to me. I vouch for you. I told them you know weapons, you know tactics, and more importantly, you don't quit. That's enough for today. Do your part." Rachel nodded, though her palms were slick with sweat. The pilot's voice crackled in their headsets. 2 minutes out. Hostile presence confirmed near village perimeter. The soldiers checked their weapons with calm precision. Rachel's shaking hands found the M4 carbine strapped to her harness. Lopez had thrust it into her grip the moment they'd lifted off. It felt heavier now, like it knew she didn't deserve to hold it. She glanced out the open side door. The desert stretched below, broken only by jagged ridges and a scattering of mud brick buildings. Smoke rose from one of the far rooftops. This wasn't training. This wasn't a movie. This was war. The Black Hawk flared, side-slipped, and then dropped fast. Rachel's stomach lurched. Dust and debris exploded upward as the skids slammed into the earth. The crew chief swung the door wide and bellowed, "Go, go, go." The squad poured out into the blinding storm of sand and noise. Rachel followed, boots hitting hard dirt, body crouched instinctively low. She could hardly see, her eyes burning, but she moved with them, clinging to Lopez's shadow. Gunfire cracked in the distance, sharp, ugly, real. The sound froze her blood. At school, she'd imagined firefights, pretended to be brave. But the sound of live rounds cutting through air was nothing like her imagination. Lopez shoved her against a crumbling wall. "Stay low. Cover our flank." Rachel raised the rifle, hands trembling so badly the barrel wavered. But she forced herself to steady it, forcing her breath to slow, just like her father had taught her years ago. Slow is smooth. Smooth is steady. Steady is fast. The squad moved forward, clearing alleys with practice sweeps. Rachel's world narrowed to the patch of dirt in front of her muzzle, to the pounding in her temples. Suddenly, a figure darted from behind a corner, weapon raised. Rachel didn't think. She squeezed the trigger. The rifle bucked, deafening her. The figure crumpled, screaming, weapon skittering away. Her chest heaved. Her first shot. Her first hit. The soldier behind her barked, "Good eyes, Torres," and sprinted past. She blinked hard, forcing the blur of tears away. She couldn't fall apart now. They pushed deeper into the village. The air reeked of smoke and cordite. Dogs barked. Somewhere a child cried. And then chaos. From a rooftop, 3 militants opened fire with an old Pecan machine gun, rounds spraying down a narrow street. Concrete exploded, shards stinging Rachel's arms. One soldier went down, screaming, blood pouring from his leg. Suppressing fire. Lopez shouted. She grabbed Rachel's shoulder. "Now's your moment. See that window?" Rachel swallowed hard, sighted through her iron sights. The gunner's silhouette flickered in the dusty window frame. She forced her breath steady, squeezed once. The shot rang true. The gunner fell back. The heavy weapon went silent. The squad surged forward, dragging the wounded man with them. Lopez's voice was fierce, almost proud. "Told you were ready." But Rachel knew this was just the beginning. By the time the firefight ebbed, Rachel's body was a trembling mess of adrenaline and exhaustion. The squad had secured the village, driving out the remaining militants with precision. Civilians emerged from hiding, wide-eyed and terrified. Rachel sat on a broken wall, rifle across her knees, hands still shaking. She stared at the blood smeared on her sleeves. Not hers, but the wounded soldiers, whose legs she had helped bandage under Lopez's direction. 17 hours ago, she had been a high school nobody, mocked for wearing camo. Now, she had pulled the trigger in combat and knelt in blood-soaked dirt, pressing a tourniquet on a man's thigh while bullets cracked overhead. It didn't feel real. The squad regrouped near the center of the village. One of the soldiers, a burly sergeant named Griggs, approached her. He had been the first to doubt her on the helicopter. "You froze when we touched down," he said flatly. Rachel's heart sank. Shame burned her face. But then Griggs's expression shifted. "But you pulled it together. Took out that rooftop gunner. Saved all of us a hell of a lot of trouble." He extended a gloved hand. "Respect, Torres." Rachel blinked, stunned. Slowly, she shook his hand. The simple gesture sent a surge of warmth through her. Respect. The one thing she had chased all her life. Lopez clapped her on the back. "Told you she had grit." As dusk fell, the Black Hawk returned, sweeping in low to extract the team. Rachel climbed aboard with the others, her body aching but her spirit alight. The village shrank beneath them as they lifted away, just another scar on the desert. Inside the cabin, the squad dozed, heads lolling in exhaustion. Rachel couldn't sleep. She stared out the open door at the fading horizon, clutching her father's dog tags under her jacket. She thought of her classmates, the ones who had sneered and laughed. They would never believe what had happened. They couldn't, but it didn't matter anymore, because she knew she had stood in fire and not broken. When they landed back at base, floodlights bathing the tarmac, the squad filed out one by one. Commanders waited with clipboards. Medics hustled the wounded away. Rachel climbed down last, dirt-streaked and hollow-eyed. A colonel approached, stern-faced. He looked her over, noting the camo jacket, the too young face. "Torres, is it?" he asked. "Yes, sir," she said, voice barely steady. He studied her for a long moment. Then, "You weren't supposed to be there, but reports say you held your own. That earns recognition." Rachel stood frozen as he turned and walked away. Recognition. It wasn't medals. It wasn't applause. But it was more than she had ever been given before. That night, lying on a cot in the base barracks, she replayed every moment. The fear, the fire, the respect earned. Sleep came slowly, but when it did, it was deep and untroubled. Because for the first time in her life, Rachel Torres didn't just dream of being a soldier. She was one. The next morning, Rachel woke to the sharp blare of the base siren. Her body protested every movement as she sat up on the cot. Her arms ached, her back throbbed, and her hands still carried faint tremors. She expected Lopez to dismiss her, to say her one lucky night was over. Instead, the staff sergeant stood at the foot of her cot, boots planted wide, face unreadable. "Gear up," Lopez said. "We roll out in 20. Rachel blinked. "I'm going again. You're part of the squad now. Until command says otherwise, you stick with us." Rachel swallowed hard. A mix of pride and dread knotted in her stomach. She was no longer the invisible girl mocked in high school, but she was also no longer protected by the excuse of being a civilian. She was accountable now. Within the hour, she was back in the belly of a Humvee convoy, dust clouds rising behind them as they rolled out into the wasteland. The mission was clear: recover stolen weapons stashed in a series of caves beyond the ridge. Lopez sat across from her, watching closely. "Yesterday you proved you can act under fire. Today we find out if it was luck or grit." Rachel nodded, gripping her rifle tighter. The convoy halted at the edge of the ridge. The squad dismounted, boots crunching against gravel. Ahead, the dark mouth of a cave yawned wide. It smelled of damp earth and danger. Inside, the air was cooler but heavy with tension. The squad moved in, flashlights slicing through the blackness. Rachel stayed near the rear, every nerve stretched thin. Halfway in, the tunnel split. Lopez raised a fist. "We'll clear both. Griggs, you take Bravo team left. I'll lead Alpha right. Torres, you're with me." Rachel's pulse spiked. She followed Lopez, the passage narrowing until the walls brushed her shoulders. Every step echoed too loud. A sudden sound, scuff of boots. Voices in the darkness. Lopez motioned silently. The squad knelt, weapons up. Shadows flickered ahead, figures silhouetted against a dim lantern glow. Militants, at least 5, crouched around crates of rifles. Lopez leaned close, whispering, "We need those crates intact. Suppress, don't shred." Rachel's hand shook, but she nodded. The squad burst from cover, weapons barking. Chaos erupted. The militants scattered, some firing wildly, others scrambling deeper into the tunnels. Rachel aimed low, firing controlled bursts that cracked stone and sent the enemy diving. One of them rushed forward with a knife. Rachel's breath froze, then instinct took over. She swung the butt of her rifle, slamming it into his jaw. He dropped, the blade clattering across the floor. Lopez barked, "Torres, rear guard." Rachel spun, catching sight of 2 more militants flanking from behind. Her finger tightened. 2 shots. 2 bodies collapsed. Her heart hammered. 3 engagements. No hesitation. When the dust cleared, the squad secured the crates. Lopez's voice cut through the quiet. "Torres, check perimeter." Rachel swallowed, edging deeper into the cave's dark. Her flashlight beam danced across stone. Then she froze. Another figure lurked in the shadows, a boy, maybe 12, maybe younger. wide eyes, filthy clothes, trembling hands clinging to a pistol far too big for him. Her throat tightened. The boy's hand shook, but the muzzle pointed straight at her chest. Memories crashed in. The kids at school laughing, mocking her jacket, treating her like she didn't belong. And here was another child, shoved into a war that wasn't his, trying to be something he wasn't ready to be. Rachel lowered her rifle slowly. "It's okay," she whispered. "You don't have to do this." The boy's eyes glistened. For a heartbeat, time held. Then his grip faltered. The pistol slipped from his fingers, clattering onto the rocks. Rachel exhaled sharply, relief flooding her. She kicked the weapon away and pulled him into her arms. Lopez appeared, rifle still ready. She studied the scene, then nodded once. "Good call, Torres." For Rachel, that meant more than medals. She hadn't just survived. She had chosen restraint. Humanity. As they emerged into the harsh sunlight, weapons secured, Lopez clapped her on the shoulder. "Today you proved it wasn't luck. You've got soldier's blood." Rachel didn't answer. She just tightened her grip on her rifle, knowing the test was far from over. That night, as the squad rested back at base, orders came down. Militants were massing in the valley. The same village Rachel had helped defend was under threat again, only this time in greater force. The squad was tasked with holding until reinforcements could arrive. Rachel sat with the others, checking her gear. Griggs gave her a nod. No words, just acknowledgement. For a soldier, that was everything. Lopez briefed them. "We dig in at the ridge above the village. This won't be clean. It's going to be hours of pressure, maybe all night. You keep your head down, conserve ammo, and remember, the people in that village are counting on us." Rachel listened, heart pounding. Yesterday, she was just a girl who wore camo at school. Tonight, she would help hold a line against a wave of enemies. They moved out under moonlight, the desert cold biting at their faces. The ridge loomed like a jagged scar above the village. From here, Rachel could see lanterns flickering in windows, the faint movements of civilians trying to prepare for the storm. The squad dug in, sandbags hastily stacked, rifles mounted. Rachel's hands blistered as she shoveled dirt, but she didn't complain. Every muscle screamed, but she forced herself on. Then, the first shot cracked across the valley. A tracer streaked through the night sky. The attack had begun. Dozens of militants surged forward, shadows spilling across the sand like a living tide. Gunfire erupted from every direction. The ridge shook with the roar of rifles and machine guns. Rachel crouched behind cover, sighting down her rifle. She squeezed the trigger, rounds finding targets in the waves below. For hours, it was chaos. The militants pushed, retreated, pushed again. Explosions lit the night, shrapnel singing through the air. Rachel's ears rang, her throat raw from shouting warnings and calls. At one point, Lopez was thrown to the ground by a blast. Without thinking, Rachel dragged her to safety, shielding her with her own body as dirt and stone rained down. "Torres!" Lopez shouted over the din. "You're not supposed to be here, but damn it, I'm glad you are." Rachel didn't answer. She just reloaded and kept firing. The hours blurred, the world reduced to muzzle flashes, screams, and the iron determination not to yield. She thought of her classmates again, the ones who mocked her. If they could see her now, holding a ridge with warriors twice her size, they wouldn't laugh. By dawn, the valley was littered with silence. Smoke drifted in pale ribbons. The militants had withdrawn, beaten back by a handful of defenders who refused to break. Rachel lowered her rifle, arms trembling, eyes burning. She had made it through another night, another test, and though exhaustion pressed heavy, she felt something deeper. Not pride, not relief, belonging. Rachel barely had time to sleep after the battle in the valley. Her eyes burned, her muscles ached, but the war didn't wait for exhaustion to pass. By midday, word came in. The militants were regrouping. This time, not the valley floor, but closer, inside the very village they had defended. The squad was ordered to move in, to clear house by house, street by street. As the Humvees rolled into the village, Rachel felt the difference instantly. The quiet was wrong. Windows hung open, doors ajar. No children playing, no voices. Just an eerie silence that pressed on the heart like a weight. Lopez muttered, "They're in here, waiting." Rachel adjusted her helmet, pulse quickening. The narrow alleys loomed ahead, each shadow a threat. The squad dismounted. Boots hit the ground, rifles raised. They advanced slowly, sweeping corners, checking rooftops. Rachel stayed in the middle, eyes darting everywhere. She forced herself to breathe steady, though every sense screamed. The first shot shattered the silence. A sniper from a rooftop. The bullet clipped the edge of a wall inches from Rachel's head. "Contact!" Griggs shouted. The squad scrambled for cover. Bullets tore through plaster and wood. Shouts echoed in foreign tongues, the militants firing from windows and doors. Rachel pressed against a wall, heart hammering. She was back in school for a split second, hearing laughter, feeling eyes on her, waiting for her to fail. But this wasn't school. This was war, and failure meant death. She peered around the corner, spotting the muzzle flash on the roof. Carefully, she steadied her aim. One shot. The sniper dropped. Lopez's voice barked, "Torres on me." Rachel dashed forward, boots slapping against dust and debris. Together, they breached a door, clearing a darkened room. Two militants inside barely had time to react before they were down. The squad moved like a wave, crashing through the village. Every corner fought them. Every shadow hid danger. At one point, Rachel found herself separated. The sound of gunfire echoed in all directions, but in the narrow alley, it was just her and silence. Then, a figure lunged from the side. The boy from the cave. His face streaked with dirt, eyes wide. He wasn't armed this time. Rachel froze. Before she could speak, a militant grabbed him, shoving a pistol to his head. Using him as a shield, Rachel's chest tightened. The militant shouted something harsh, dragging the boy backward. Rachel raised her rifle, but the angle was wrong. One slip, and the boy would die. Her mind raced. Then instinct surged. She dropped her rifle, letting it clatter onto the ground. She raised her empty hands, stepping forward slowly. The militant sneered. His grip loosened just slightly, enough for the boy to twist. In that split second, Rachel lunged, grabbing the pistol, twisting it free, slamming her elbow into the man's jaw. He crumpled. Rachel kicked the weapon away, pulling the boy behind her. The boy's eyes shone with tears, but he clung to her arm like lifeline. Rachel didn't think. She just said, "You're safe. Stay low. Run when I tell you." Minutes later, the squad regrouped. The firefight raged until finally the last militants were pushed out. Smoke curled from broken windows. Dust hung heavy in the air. The village was scarred but alive. As the squad caught their breath, Lopez looked at Rachel. "You didn't just fight today. You led." Rachel blinked. "A what?" "You moved without orders. You saved that boy. You cleared rooms like you've been doing this for years. That's leadership." Rachel shook her head. "I just didn't want anyone to die." "That's exactly why you belong here," Lopez said softly. For the first time, Rachel believed it. Weeks later, the war had shifted again. The squad was reassigned deeper into the theater, leaving behind the valley and the village. For Rachel, every day blurred into drills, missions, exhaustion, and brief moments of silence that never lasted. But she was no longer the outcast, no longer the girl mocked for wearing camo to school. She was Torres now, a soldier. One late afternoon, as the sun bled across the desert horizon, the squad returned to base after another grueling patrol. Rachel was tired, body bruised, but mind steady. That's when Lopez handed her a sealed envelope. From command, Lopez said, "For you." Rachel frowned, tearing it open. Inside, a letter. It wasn't orders. It wasn't commendations. It was a notice. Her squad would rotate back to the States for a short reprieve. And she was included. The news stunned her. For months, she had been living in the constant rhythm of survival. The idea of going back, of seeing home again, felt surreal. When the Black Hawk lifted them from the desert days later, Rachel stared out the open door, wind whipping her hair. She remembered the first time she had seen one land, on her school football field. That moment had changed everything. Now, she wasn't a spectator. She was inside part of it. Back home, her arrival didn't go unnoticed. Word had spread. The girl who once got laughed at for wearing camo, the one no one took seriously, was now returning as a decorated soldier. When a helicopter thundered down onto the same football field, crowds gathered. Teachers, classmates, neighbors, all stood watching. Rachel stepped out, boots sinking into the grass. The same ground where she had once felt small, humiliated. But now the laughter was gone. Instead, there was silence. Respect. Her former classmates stared in awe. Some with guilt. Some with pride. None with mockery. Rachel didn't smile. She didn't wave. She just walked, head high, carrying the weight of everything she had endured. A younger student broke the silence, whispering to a friend, "That's Rachel Torres, the girl in camo." The words carried. And this time, they weren't said with laughter. They were said with reverence. Rachel paused, looking back at the helicopter. For her, it wasn't about proving them wrong anymore. It was about proving herself right, that she belonged in the uniform, in the fight, in the brotherhood of soldiers. And she had. As the sun dipped behind the bleachers, Rachel felt something settle in her chest. Not pride, not triumph, but peace. For once, she didn't have to fight for the right to be seen. She already was.